Now, 40 years on from the Falklands War, many of those sent to the South Atlantic have been reflecting on their time in the conflict.
Peter Robinson was 24 when a photo of him marching with the Union flag was taken, and that photo would become a lasting and symbolic image of that time. He's been telling us about it.
I'm Peter Robinson. I was a corporal in the Royal Marines in 40 Commando during the Falklands conflict and became the image, the yomper. Obviously, a lot of Royal Marines remember this photograph. Some of the younger guys come up to me and said, "You're the reason I joined up." I always apologise profusely. And it is, everyone remembers this particular photograph. And it's, you know, it's a bit of pride actually to knowing that that was me. But again, at the same time, it's my back, which is even better. It represents all the Royal Marines that served throughout the Falklands War. The rumour came around that there were white flags flying in Stanley and the Argentinians had surrendered. So, Marine in front of me, Willie Evans, had the flag and we put it on the aerial. There was a point where the flag did fly off into the minefield that we were traversing at the time, and someone behind me picked it up and we put it back on the aerial. Pete Holgate, the naval photographer, was there and he was taking photographs. At that moment, the wind just took the flag and he took the photograph and he shouted after me, "Watch out," he said, "that's going to be on the front page of the Globe and Royal." As it was, it was. Although it looks like I'm the back of the queue, I'm actually in the middle of a very, very long queue. It was a cold day that day, and you'll notice that probably my hands are clenched together trying to keep my fingers warm. The other thing that we weren't expecting was what they call the scree runs. These are dirty great big boulders and we had to traverse those at night time, carrying all our kit prior to an attack. It's physical, but it's also mental. The mental bit that you have to deal with, because you do see some sights that you shouldn't see, and I believe that I've just, somewhere in the back of my mind, those memories are still there, but I've built a brick wall.
Sculptor Philip Jackson was commissioned to produce a 3-ton statue to stand guard at the gates of the Royal Marines Museum at Eastney.
The idea of the statue was inspired by the well-known photographer Corporal Peter Robinson. I was invited to go down, meet Margaret Thatcher and unveil the statue with her. She said to me, she said, "Well, all these people haven't only come to see me, but they've come to see you as well." She said, "So I think we ought to do a walkabout." With that, she grabbed me and said, "Come on, off we go." Passion now, I suppose, is horses rather than rifles. So we're now a charity where we rehome Crablet Arab horses. Hello, you. Horses are very therapeutic. One of the aims in the future is to hopefully open the place up for people that are suffering with PTSD maybe. Myself, I think I've been fortunate in the fact that I can just probably put things in the back of my mind and just get on with life. I don't like being termed a hero. A lot more guys out there did a lot more than what I did. It's just the fact that my photograph became the image.
Really interesting this week hearing some of the reminiscences of those who
fascinating.
For whom it feels, you know, some of those memories were very, very fresh, even though it's 40 years.
Yeah. 40 years ago today, a luxury cruise ship set sail from Southampton carrying 2,000 British troops to the Falklands.
Nicknamed the Great White Whale, the SS Canberra was refitted for her military journey within days of disembarking passengers. And one of the soldiers on board was Army medic Brian Short, who's with us now on the sofa. Now, Brian, welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
It requires a little bit of explanation, this one, because for a lot of people, they'll be thinking a pleasure liner used to go to the Falklands for war purposes. I mean, how did that come about? Why?
Well, firstly, a Royal Marine, not Army medic, so it's very important
My
for those
apologies.
of us.
Absolutely,
of a certain
quite right.
Cat badge, but when the task force was needed to go, the Royal Navy no longer had the right amount of ships. So there was always a plan with the MOD to take up ships from trade, and Canberra and Norland and about 30 other ships were taken up from the Merchant Navy.
And just on the practicalities, maybe we can see, can we see the footage? I don't know if you need to see the footage now, but this was, just so people understand, it had a swimming pool. I mean, it was built for pleasure, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Canberra, the week before the Falklands, was doing cruises around the Mediterranean with guests, and then it was commandeered by the MOD But within about a week, it had 2 helicopter pads fitted over the swimming pools, forward and midships. So yeah, they were off duty, off limits to the troops because they were covered with helicopter decks.
And there was an interesting mix on board, wasn't there? Because there were 400 or so civilians who were then kind of commandeered to come with the ship, weren't there?
Well, to be fair, they weren't commandeered. They volunteered.
Right.
All credit to the P&O crew. They volunteered to stay on board, and they put through the same trials, tribulations, and risks that we all went through. And but we were being paid the Queen's shilling. We expected perhaps to be put in harm's way, and but no, all credit to them. They stayed on board for the duration.
And you were there with the Marine Band. Just tell us a bit about the role that played in this journey, because that was interesting as well, wasn't it?
Well, when the Falklands first started, we were all on Easter leave, and I was recalled from Easter leave, and we assumed the band would be guarding the barracks in Plymouth, whilst the Royal Marine Commandos, the Rafty Tufties, would go off and do the fighting. But on paper, we were part of a medical squadron, and they realised they would be 40 men short. So we were summoned, and within 48 hours, we found ourselves on the Great White Whale, going to a war.
Tell me a bit about the role that you played when you got there.
Well, initially we started doing medical and military training with the troops on board. And then after about 3 or 4 weeks, when we hoped the diplomatic efforts would work and war would be avoided, the troops on board, the Marines and the Paras, were getting there was a bit of tension, a bit of cat badge rivalry. And our boss, Captain Ware, said, well, let's break out the instruments. So we started doing music to relieve the tension and the boredom. And then we broke down into a little jazz quartet and a rock band to play in the smaller messes. So we were doing our training in the day, and in the evenings entertaining the troops and to keep them, stop them going up against each other.
And at what stage then did you come into contact with Argentinian prisoners?
Well, we knew it was a shooting war once the Belgrano and the Sheffield had been sunk, and we left Ascension Island. And about 2 weeks later, for us, it was D-Day. And on the 21st of May, Canberra went into San Carlos Bay, and we disgorged all our troops. And then for the rest of the day, we had air attacks from the Argentine Air Force. Later that day, we took our first dead and wounded on board. Some of them wounded were Argentines, who we had to guard and look after. And unfortunately, some of the deceased were people we knew, Marines we knew. So the war then took on a very different hue for me. The Argentines became the enemy in my mind, and we were in a shooting war, and things took a very different turn from that day on.
But clearly, as you described a moment ago, your role was double-headed. You were caring for Argentinians who'd been injured, as well as guarding them.
Yeah, we looked after them very well, and after the hostilities had finished, we had about 4,000 of them put on Canberra, and we had to take them home to Puerto Madryn in Argentina. And that was a very strange thing to be going into an enemy port whilst technically you were still at war with them. And on the night before we docked in Argentina, some of the group I was looking after, we'd established a certain working routine, what they could and couldn't do without asking permission. And they asked for pen and paper. And the only thing I had was a Canberra menu card.
Let's just, if you show us the picture on the front, we can pick that up. If you hold it very still for a moment, our cameras will pick that up. So what was this? This is P&O Cruises' brochure, is it?
It's a menu card that you would get in the menu in the restaurant.
Yeah.
So that's all I had, and I didn't know why they wanted it. So I said, well, there you go, senors. And they...
If you just hold it straight for it, and we'll see it. And this is signed by a number of people who are on board, is that right?
Yeah, about 20 of them signed, and basically it's a thank you card from the enemy, which is a very, I think, unique souvenir to come back from a war.
Do you have any idea what that message says that's written there?
Yes, it says, it says, thank you, Brian, thanks for looking after us, what a good Marine. Lots of things that I wish my boss had written in my staff appraisals during my time in the services.
And just to wrap up the story for us, what happened to the SS Canberra finally?
Well, the Canberra was a great ship to go to war on, and she came back, was eventually scrapped. She went back into service. But a slight addendum to this, last year I had a quick online spat with somebody about Argentine prisoners. So I produced this as evidence that we did look after them. And an Argentine historian found this, and he's found about 18 of the 20 signatories, and they've been back in touch in the last year.
Really?
That's amazing.
So that's what prompted me, that and the reunions I go to with the band, to write a book about the experiences.
It's a fascinating story, and I think a lot of people it'll be brand new to for obvious reasons. You know, they just went around at the time. Thank you for coming in for us. Really
Thanks very much.
Thank
If
you,
I could
Brian.
just mention the book,
Yeah.
The Band That Went to War, because it's an interesting book, and it tells the small but important story that the band performed in that time 40 years ago.
The Band That Went to War. Thank you.